Star Commander Dawn suddenly understood why she had trained so much in an assault mech during their voyage. For the trial, she had been assigned a Turkina, named for the first Jade Falcon tamed by a human. The first Khan of the Jade Falcons, Elizabeth Hazen. A powerful mech weighing a full 95 tons, the Turkina boasted squat raptor legs below a wide clamshell of a torso section. Its arms were nothing but autocannons and extended-range particle projector cannons. Its pauldrons housed twin racks of long-range missiles. In short, she was lethal at long range and can pick off as many Ghost Bear mechs as she possibly could. That was her job. A Question of Survival, page 257 by Brian Young. The story of the Turkina has to begin with the origin of its name. While not always the case, this Omnimech's name mattered. Following the initial settlements across the Pentagon worlds at the end of the Exodus, there was a concerted effort to convert these distant worlds into places not just where people could survive, but where civilization could thrive. This included an extensive genetic engineering program to create invasive species that could prey upon native creatures that posed a threat to the settlers. One of these genetically enhanced predators was named the Jade Falcon. With its unique coloring and razor-sharp talons, it was imported originally from the planet Eadeh to Eadeh, where it ran roughshod over the local population of creatures described as quasi-avians who were attacking livestock. These Jade Falcons were not considered very friendly creatures. I wouldn't recommend holding birdseed in your palm and beckoning them closer unless you weren't really keen on keeping that hand anyway. The tale told to young Jade Falcons describes how Elizabeth Hazen, by that point one of the precious few SLDF to retain her role as a warrior in Alexander Kerensky's New Order, was the first human being to capture and train a Jade Falcon. She happened to name that falcon Reginald, and he was a happy little guy. No wait. Now she named it Turkina to honor the wife of one of Terra's ancient Mongol Khans. That makes much more sense in the context of this video. Hazen and her loyal Turkina became inseparable, and even as the order of things began to break down on the Pentagon worlds, Turkina remained true to her owner. With conflict unavoidable, Hazen was pressed into action, even though at the time Turkina had been stricken with a fatal illness. She marched her Black Knight into battle against a Liao separatist faction and was lured into a trap which disabled her mech. Forced to eject, Hazen watched in horror as the famed General de Chevalier was killed when he was also forced to abandon his battle mech. At her lowest point, with defeat and possibly death arriving at any moment, Elizabeth Hazen had a vision of her fallen Turkina soaring through the sky. The creature chastised Hazen and encouraged her to continue fighting no matter the cost. Taking strength from Turkina's firm words, Hazen pushed herself to her feet and charged toward the enemy. Within moments, Turkina delivered a katana to Hazen's hands, which the warrior used to cut down her enemies. The validity of the story with all of its supernatural elements suggests there was some creative license taken with the facts, but don't tell a Jade Falcon that or you'll end up in a circle of equals. It's with this story in mind that we can understand this wasn't just another Omnimech for the Jade Falcons. If it was going to be called the Turkina, it had to be worthy. So let's find out if it was. The designers of the Turkina sought to create an Omnimech that could compete with the heaviest and most powerful battle mechs, but with an agile edge. Constructed from a standard JF chassis wrapped around a 285 JF Extra Light Fusion engine, the Turkina was, at a glance, a typical assault mech. However, any mech with a noble avian name like Turkina would need to fly, so 3 massive fixed JF standard jump jets were added to the mech to allow it to hop up to 90 meters on plumes of plasma and fury. 15 fixed double heat sinks set up a good standard for cooling, and the 18 tons of JF standard plate armor kept critical locations open and provided 288 points of protection. This placed the Turkina at just 1 ton shy of the Atlas D and 3 tons more than the Banshee 3S. For clan-to-clan comparison, the 95-ton Executioner only carried 13.5 tons of armor, so at that point we know the Turkina is surprisingly agile and well-armored. What's left after we slap on a gyro and bore out some space to stick a Mechwarrior inside? The remaining mass, 42 tons of it to be precise, could be dedicated to pod weapons and equipment across 32 critical locations. Often compared to the Dorscheid, which had 50.5 tons of pod space, this isn't half bad considering 6 tons of the Turkina's weight is devoted to jump jets and the Dorscheid is 5 tons heavier. The primary configuration was built for consistent long-range fire. It carried 4 additional double heat sinks to allow for both ERPPCs in the right arm to fire repeatedly while on the run. 2 LRM-15s split between the side torsos added to the Azure Firestorm, and 2 LB-5X autocannons placed into the left arm could pelt targets from a decent distance. All 6 of the weapons share a similar range profile, making unfriendly interactions with the Turkina a massive pain, especially if you're within 14 hexes and closer where you can be picked apart at medium and short range. Closing with the Turkina offered no respite. As far as heat generation goes, the 19 double heat sinks do an adequate job of keeping the battle mech cool, but firing everything while on the run still net a 6+ into the red, and would add that -1 movement modifier penalty. However, resisting firing even one of the LB-5X autocannons would drop that to a 5+, which is a still solid 15 + 15 + 5 + 30 possible LRMs worth of damage. Besides the possible heat buildup, there aren't any serious issues with this build. There are 20 shots for each LB-5X in the left arm, and each of the LRM-15s could fire 12 times before those ammo bins ran dry. To be fair, some critics point to the combination of LRMs and LB-5Xs as leaning too far in the direction of scattered damage, but overall the damage potential from the ERPPCs does strike a pretty good balance, at least in this frog's humble opinion. All down the line, Phelan saw the Jade Falcons attempting to turn or even fall back. All along the line, his wolves kept firing. His elementals swarmed a gigantic behemoth, ripping away at the armor plating as the Falcon warrior attempted to shake them free while still fighting the pull of the mud that seemed to only rise higher around his mech's shins. A 95-ton Turkina did not turn, but instead pushed across the wet mud, weathering the shots as it lumbered slowly forward, its gait uneven but determined. The wolf warrior fighting it from his tiny phantom dropped under the sheer firepower of the massive Falcon Omnimech, but the moment he fell, another wolf stepped up to take on his role. Operation Audacity, page 40, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. By the time the Turkina was ready to stomp off the production lines on Ironhold, Operation Revival was well underway. New units were rushed to the front to restock depleted Jade Falcon galaxies as quickly as possible. The first recorded sightings by Inner Sphere units were during the trial of Tukayyid in 3052. The Prime, A, B, and C configurations saw action against the Comguard. It performed well, and the Jade Falcons did their best to try to maintain a monopoly over the design. Over time, through trials and salvage, the Turkina did start to appear among the Tumans of the other clans, especially the Smoke Jaguars, who valued it until they ended up having their little eradication experience with the 2nd Star League Defense Force under Victor Steiner Davion. The ultimate fate of the Smoke Jaguar Turkinas is unknown, except for a claim that the Nova Cats may have snatched them up for themselves. Other homeworld clans like the Coyotes, Fire Mandrills, and Cloud Cobras picked up their fair share of the Turkina through trials and trade with the Falcons. As the situation across the homeworlds continued to disintegrate in the years leading up to the Wars of Reaving, more Turkinas were claimed. Reading the tea leaves, the Jade Falcons began to shift more and more of their production to the Inner Sphere occupation zone. This included a new Turkina production line set upon Sudeten, run by Olivetti Weapons. Though the Olivetti Turkinas were identical to those produced on Ironhold, it's reported that Jade Falcon Trueborn warriors were wary of piloting it upon fear that it was somehow inferior. Another Comstar Black Knight fired at the Turkina, but missed with its PPC in one of its large lasers. The second green large laser beam slagged armor on the Turkina's chest, expanding on the damage done by the missiles. The Turkina remained visible and did not shrink back despite the damage. The pilot seemed contemptuous of the Comstar efforts to kill him. As the mechs set themselves for another exchange, Falk had a feeling of dread crawl up his spine. Though his people had given as good as they've gotten in the first round of fighting, they'd only engaged half of the Jade Falcon force. Prince of Havoc, page 48, by Michael A. Stackpole. If the primary configuration for the Turkina isn't pushing your bird buttons, you're in luck because there were plenty of other options. The A configuration, for example, went with a comparatively simple build around a pair of Gauss rifles split between the arms. Each was fed by 2 tons of ammunition, 16 shots, and they were backed up by a pair of LRM-20 launchers split between the side torsos. Each of those had 2 tons of ammunition, or 12 shots, to make count. With the standard 15 double heat sinks, heat is not an issue, as the full Alpha Strike on the run only generated 16 heat total. You could stand the A config on Mercury and remain cool as a cucumber. The big drawback for the A configuration was the total reliance upon ammunition for all 4 weapons. After 16 shots from the Gauss rifle and 12 shots apiece from the LRM-20s, you're left with a well-armored but very slow, mostly helpless target. Just stay out of physical combat range, and even a Locust could eventually bring this bird down. If you're really into the Gauss rifle, the A configuration might be your date to the dance, but personally, I'd rather just stick to the Prime configuration if I had to pick between those two. Hopping on down to the configuration B, we get to meet the Set Everything on Fire with Lasers option. The B config features a pair of large pulse lasers set into the left arm, backed up by a pair of ER large lasers set into the right arm. Starting at mid-range, a pair of ER medium lasers split between the side torsos add to the light show, and finally, starting at 12 hexes, a pair of medium pulse lasers add vaporization to injury with their installation in the head and center torso. All of these lasers were aided by a targeting computer set into the right arm and kept mostly cool with 25 double heat sinks. It's all a very tight fit, as not a single critical hit location is left open on this config. It earns its award for best Tetris construction of the day. Heat management on the B configuration is wild, as you can actually fire all 4 large lasers and 1 of the mediums while on the run and not go into the red. After that, you're on your own, as a full Alpha Strike while on the run would leave the mech at 14 heat into the red. It could be worth it though, if the time is right and your target is juicy. Overall, the Turkina B configuration is very powerful and very accurate, but it borders on a friendship killer with those -3 accuracy boosted pulse lasers and ability to fire them every single turn. I'm not saying you can't use it, but make sure that when you do, you're not going to get socked in the face after you turn your buddy's Atlas into party confetti. The Turkina targeted the Grim Reaper and cut loose with all of its weapons. Both pulse lasers sent a storm of green laser bolts screaming through the Grim Reaper's weakened chest armor. They evaporated the last of it, then incinerated internal support structures and engine shielding. One of the large lasers melted through the last of the armor on the Grim Reaper's right arm and started on the myomer beneath, while the other combined with the medium pulse laser to completely gut the Grim Reaper, collapsing the mech and driving its engine out through the back. The other weapons shredded yet more armor, but the damage meant nothing as the Comstar mech slammed into the ground. Prince of Havoc, page 76, by Michael A. Stackpole. If you're looking for more of a close-range brawler, the Turkina C configuration is packed with dangerous weaponry that could ruin your target's entire afternoon. Starting out with the big guns, the LB-20X autocannon in the left arm can put up big numbers with either cluster or solid shot, and it has 4 tons of ammunition with which to play. Backing up the big autocannons were 2 large pulse lasers set into the right arm, 2 medium pulse lasers installed into the left torso, and a Streak SRM-6 placed into the right torso. The SRM ammo is stored in the center torso because why not? It's behind 45 points of armor. If you're taking critical hits there, you're already in a lot of trouble. At very close range, 2 flamers were added to the legs of all places, and 2 machine guns were added to the right torso along with a half ton of their ammunition. An active probe was added to the Turkina's head because, sure, why not? And finally, 2 A-pods were added to the mech's legs to deal with any bothersome infantry or ice cream trucks that might wander too close. The Turkina C configuration, while clearly intended for short-range combat, is an absolute mess of weapon systems and electronics that make me tired just looking at it. It's too much. Lose the flamers and machine guns and slap on a couple of more lasers or something. Yes, it can hit hard with its big guns, but everything else feels like the techs were just slapping on whatever they had handy. This hurts. I'm tired. This configuration makes me very tired. Let's just move on. I have fought with you, he continued. I've trained you. I've shared your suffering and triumph these past few months. I know you to be true Jade Falcons, the strongest, the bravest, the most pure in spirit since Turkina delivered Elizabeth Hazen her sword. You are steeped in honor. but our enemy has none. They will not show you honor. They will not respect you. Without question, page 62 by Brian Young. The next official configuration is the M config, and it didn't hit until 3058. It returned the long-range focus with its collection of weaponry, starting with the pair of ER large lasers split between the Omnimax arms. Their 10 damage per shot was backed up by 2 LB5X autocannons and 2 LB2X autocannons, each split between the arms. Each autocannon was served by 1 ton of its appropriate ammunition stored in the arms as well. 2 LRM5s were added to the side torsos as a little treat. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and declare the first instance of an emotional support medium pulse laser located in the Turkina's head. With an added 16th double heatsink, the Turkina M can alpha strike while on the run, but it'll end up at 6+ heat into the red, which will leave the mech with that -1 movement penalty next turn. While the 2 ER large lasers can do their thing, the 4 LBX autocannons suggest this Turkina might be better off used as an anti-air platform rather than a battlefield heavy hitter. I don't have much to say about the M other than it's not a configuration that does much to move the needle. There are plenty of other better options, including, once again, going back to that prime config if you need a long-range build. The Turkina D configuration debuted in 3061, and it went all in on the new advanced tactical missile launcher technology. It carried 4 ATM-12 launchers split between the arms, with each pair of launchers fed by 5 tons of ammunition. With long-range ammo, that's a possible 48 damage in missiles. Standard munition, 96 possible missile damage. High explosive, all the public school kids like myself are on the edge of their seats waiting to find out what 48 times 3 is. Let me get the calculator. 144 damage. Yeah, just like I thought. Private school kids just multiplied 50 times 3 in their heads and subtracted 6. Practically wizardry. While obviously the realistic damage output would be less due to the nature of missile weaponry, that perfect moment still remains out there for when the dice gods smile upon you and you turn that enemy mech into a smoking crater in the ground. We can all dream that glorious dream. The only other weapons on the Turkina D were a pair of ER medium lasers. One added to the head and the other to the center torso. The mech's 17 double heatsinks are adequate for running and firing the missile launchers, but once the lasers enter the equation, the situation can become spicy and warm. Overall, the Turkina D is very dangerous at all ranges, and your enemies have to be lucky a lot to survive the seemingly endless waves of incoming missiles. If the configuration has a downside, it's the lack of a heavy punching weapon that could open a breach for the missiles to seek critical hits. But we can't have everything. Opportunity cost spares no one. Not even the Turkina. Before Greenfeather, the hangar's deck rear bulkhead loomed like a dully gleamed cliff of steel. A mech-sized gangway leading aft to a machine shop opened in its base. Malvina knew the shop had been blasted open to space as well. She ground her teeth. She must not escape. The Turkina leapt again. A PPC beam brushed the Shrike's left flank. Electronics screamed. A Rending of Falcons, page 336, by Victor Milan. For the fans of the Ultra autocannons, the Turkina H configuration that arrived in 3062 highlights the power of the UAC-10 combined with the accuracy boost of a targeting computer. They were split between the mech's side torsos and each fed by 2 tons of ammunition. The targeting computer sat in the right arm along with one of the 3 heavy medium lasers. The other 2 were placed into the left arm. Bolstering the damage at mid-range were a pair of medium pulse lasers set into the center torso and head. 5 additional double heat sinks bring the total to 20, all which are needed. A full alpha strike while on the run left the H configuration at +3 into the red. If both UAC-10s were double fired, that's still quite doable, and if you don't double fire the UACs or lay off a laser, the mech is actually heat neutral. Easy peasy. The H configuration is quite solid, but its value might depend upon just how enamored you are with the UAC-10. The medium-heavy lasers hit hard, but their range makes for a frustrating march to close range where they can be effective. When you have a 353 movement profile, crossing that battlefield can be quite the chore. In 3070, the first official configuration featuring a hyper-assault Gauss rifle stomped onto the scene with configuration E. This Turkina carried a massive Hag 40, which filled the mech's entire right arm and was fed by 4 tons of ammunition. That's 12 shots for those playing the game at home. If all that scatter damage isn't enough for you, the E configuration Turkina also carries 6, yep, you heard me right, 6 Streak SRM6s spread across the side torsos and arm. They're fed by 4 tons of Streak ammunition. Doing the math, which is always dangerous for this creator, that's 6 times 6 times 2 for a possible max damage of 72 should all the launchers achieve their lock. Adding that to the Hag 40 cluster damage, and this might be one of the most sandpapery battle mechs that we've seen in quite a while. Just thinking about rolling the damage for this on the tabletop is enough to make me question the entire venture. The 15 double heat sinks are more than enough to deal with the heat generated from the Hag 40 on the run, but at close range, once you bring in all 6 streak launchers, things could get warm if they all achieve their locks. Admittedly, that isn't likely to happen for all but the most prone of situations, but it is something to keep your eye on so it doesn't sneak up on you. At worst, it's only 4+ into the red, so you're fine. You can have a little alpha strike as a treat. Our next official configuration for the Turkina is the Z, and it's unique as it features some technology exclusive to Clan Coyote and the Society during the Wars of Reaving. It hit in 3072 and was packed with 4 improved ATM-12 launchers scattered across the side torsos and arms. You might be asking what's the difference between an ATM and an IATM, and I'd say the extra I stands for suffering. Kidding aside, the IATMs operate just like the ATM, except that it uses the Streak missile launcher locking system to prevent firing without first achieving a guided missile lock. The IATMs can also carry improved magnetic pulse ammunition and improved Inferno missiles, which the standard ATMs cannot. Additionally, the IATMs can take advantage of indirect fire. Unfortunately, if you want to play a lore-accurate Turkina Z configuration, that would restrict you to playing just a few decades between the clan invasion and the late 3070s among the Society and Clan Coyote. It would be incredibly unlikely to ever see the ITM technology in the inner sphere. The entire weapons system was declared extinct after 3080. It remains to be seen if the other homeworld clans might resurrect that technology someday. Back on track here, the 4 IATM-12 launchers on the Turkina Z config were fed by a total of 10 tons of ammunition, which added up to 12 shots per launcher plus 2. How that ammo is split up for type was up to the Mechwarrior or mission demands. As far as offensive weaponry goes, that's it for the mech. It also did carry a light tag unit in the center torso as well as a Nova CEWS, which was a fancy electronics package we've covered on the channel before. Think of it as an active probe mixed with ECM and C3 computer. It's not something I've ever used in a game, and I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on it. The Z configuration's 17 double heat sinks are adequate for running and gunning with the IATMs, but if the CEWS is brought into play, it will net a +2 heat deficit. Overall, the Z configuration is a very niche mech that is really only available for a short period on the timeline. It's okay, but the limited ammunition impacted its usefulness in long battles. Feeling the heat rise in her cockpit and the anxiety swell inside of her, Alexis fired another volley of shots at it. If taking it down was all their little detour did, it would be worth it. Her PPCs hit hard, liquefying so much more of its center mass, revealing its internal skeletal structure that offered the last protection for the mech's gyro and fusion engine. Then her missiles bore in. One of them shot right into the hole in the center armor and exploded, blowing the huge mech apart, sending loose limbs and armor scraps raining across the battlefield in a haze of smoke and fire. Without question, page 89 by Brian Young. If you thought we were going to return to a more typical build with the configuration U, then I have some news for you. It's not going to happen yet. The U configuration for the Turkina showed up in the timeline in 3077, and it reflects a much more aggressive Clan Jade Falcon in its use of talons in the mech's legs. These claws improve the damage dealt in both kicking and death from above attacks on a target. In the case of the Turkina, normally kicking damage is 19, but talons take that base number and multiply it by 1.5, meaning the U configuration caused 29 points of damage when it decided to play footsie. Another unique trait for the Turkina U is the addition of 2 liquid storage tanks split between the side torsos and the use of hard gel. When operating underwater or in hostile environments, a location with hard gel installed will automatically seal in the case of a breach, allowing for safer operation. The rules are a bit to chew on, so we won't go into them here, but if you are interested, they can be found in the Tactical Operations Sourcebook. In the case of the Turkina U configuration, both arms and all 3 torso slots have the hard gel installed. Other offensive weaponry included an advanced Tactical Missile 9 system in the right arm, a pair of LRM-15s split between the side torsos, and 10 ER small lasers aided by a targeting computer split between the arms, 7 in the left arm and 3 in the right. Nestled in the left arm was a coolant pod. Finally, an active probe sits in the head. The Turkina U config's 15 double heatsinks can handle general use, though a theoretical alpha strike with all 10 ER small lasers and missile launchers while on the run would leave the mech at 8+ heat into the red. Presumably, that's what the coolant pod is for. When that perfect moment strikes, pop the coolant and you're good to go for round 2. Overall, the U configuration stood as a very niche build with a specific purpose of working in hostile environments. I bet it would be wild in a narrative campaign. If you're looking for something slightly more traditional yet really want to give those talons a try, the Turkina X configuration may be your date to the dance. It hit the scene in 3077, which is perfect for the Jade Falcons, who are going to need some more terrifying machines with sharp things attached for when Malvina shows up in a couple of decades down the timeline. Starting at long range, 2 LRM-20s aided by Artemis 5 fire control systems were split between the left and right arms, and each was fed by 3 tons of Case 2 protected ammunition. That's 18 shots per launcher for the peanut gallery. Starting at 12 hexes and closer, 6 medium pulse lasers provided powerful motivation not to be anywhere near this Turkina. The -2 accuracy boost at 7 damage apiece can and will wreck just about anything in short order. Finally, an ECM suite was added to the Turkina, so I'm going to declare this our Operation Sneaky Sneak variant of the day. The 17 double heatsinks on the Turkina X, which definitely doesn't sound like a 31st century energy drink full of sugar and caffeine, were adequate for general use, though a full alpha strike on the run did leave the mech at 4+ heat into the red. Not great, but not terrible either if the moment is right. Heat management is easy if you could just lay off one of the medium pulse lasers and it would actually remain heat neutral. Holding off on 2 would get you back to 0 after an alpha strike the previous turn. With the combination of medium pulse lasers, ECM, and those talons in the feet, the Turkina X is a nasty close-range brawler that can also be a pain at long range thanks to those accurate LRM-20s. There's just very little wiggle room against it. No matter what, it's going to be a problem. Therefore, I really like it. Our last official configuration for the Turkina is the T config, and I'd like to sit down with the CGL team and just find out who is pushing the Protomech autocannons. I just want to talk. I'm not angry. I'm just curious to hear the rationale. I'll even keep my hands on the table in plain sight. Deep calming breaths, Mechfrog. Deep calming breaths. The Turkina T shows up in 3142 on the timeline and features a pair of ERPPCs set into the right arm, no problem so far, and apparently balanced, quote-unquote, by a pair of Protomech AC-8 autocannons installed into the left arm. The AC-8s were fed by just 2 tons of ammunition, which is 10 shots apiece. The final additions to the build were a pair of Streak LRM-15s split between the side torsos, with just 8 shots per launcher. I genuinely do not understand the Turkina T config. While the mech can consistently fire just the ERPPCs while on the move thanks to the 16 double heatsinks, firing anything else sets you into the red. Looking for a moment at the Protomech AC-8s, each of them weigh in at 5.5 tons. Add in the 2 tons of ammunition and we're looking at 13 tons of mass devoted to doing 8 × 2 damage. An Ultra AC-10 weighs in at 10 tons, takes up 4 critical locations. With 2 tons of ammunition, you get a potential 10 × 2 damage, with a ton of mass left over for something like an ER medium laser, which would be another 7 damage. Just looking at the back of the napkin possibilities, the Protomech AC-8s are outclassed over and over by better options, especially once you factor in their incredibly short range of just 10 hexes max. I won't beat a dead horse here, but I will shove it a little bit. The Turkina T configuration is hobbled by the addition of these weapons, and that bothers me, probably more than it should. With that unpleasantness behind us, I did want to take a crack at creating a useful IlClan era MF configuration for our dear Turkina. My goal was to create a config which could be broadly useful, considering the more recent official configurations tended to hyper-focus on one niche or another. The Turkina MF configuration started with a pair of large pulse lasers split between the left and right arms. These workhorse weapons are hard to ignore, and it's always tough to resist putting on more for these big clan Omnimex. Backing them up in the side torsos, 2 advanced Tactical Missile 9 launchers provided added flexibility. Each of the launchers has their own dedicated 3 tons of ammunition, which is all stored in the mech's arms. A plasma cannon set into the right arm provides a wildcard attack against heatsink opponents and is absolutely devastating against infantry and battle armor. To aid in helping the Turkina MF close in on targets successfully, an anti-missile system was added to the left torso and fed by 1 ton of ammunition stored in the left arm. At close range, 2 SRM-6 launchers set into the right arm pack a significant punch, though they are fed by just a single ton of ammunition. There's probably enough ammo in that arm anyway. Finally, and most importantly, an ER small laser was added to the head location to keep the mech warrior inside, safe and feeling supported. The MF configuration's 19 double heatsinks are more than enough to cover the use of the large pulse lasers and ATM-9 launchers while on the run, remaining heat negative, but if the plasma cannon is brought into play, choices have to be made, lest the Turkina also end up with heat issues. Firing the primary weapons, including the lasers, ATMs, and SRM-6s, but holding back on the plasma cannon, leaves the MF configuration at 4+ heat into the red, which is entirely doable. Adding the plasma cannon pushes the total heat to 11+ into the red, which would be quite problematic for a next turn that includes a -2 modifier to movement. Then again, doing a potential 98 damage plus 2d6 heat added to the target might be worth it in the perfect moment. As always, I'm curious to know what you think about it. If you want to give the Turkina configuration MF a try, I've included the PDF record sheet for it in the link in the video notes below. So why do we love the Turkina? I think that answer is a bit of a conflicted one. While undoubtedly a very powerful clan Omnimech, more than a few of the Turkina's official configurations struggle to find purpose outside of niche situations. The lore behind the mech's name is strong, but other than an epic low-gravity fight between Malvina Hazen and Jaina Pride in the Rending of Falcons, and Star Commander Alexis's recent antics in Without Question, the Turkina hasn't been frequently represented in the novels. That's a bit of a shame, but also understandable, as the medium and heavy mechs tend to show up more often in the hands of main characters. The future looks slightly perilous for the Turkina, as the only functioning production lines for it are on Sudeten, within the hands of G. Chistu's revived Jade Falcons. It's quite possible that the Turkina's destiny could be tied to their survival in the face of multiple revitalized enemies. There are some really strong configurations for the mech, and the latest CGL sculpt and art for the Turkina does a long way to make it a more realistic visual design. I've had the classic Raupartha Turkina for a long time, and as much fun as it has been in games, I do have to admit it looks completely absurd. I was able to paint up 4 out of the 5 that I own by the time I needed to get this video together. The battle value would be atrocious, but I need my full star of Turkinas to be very loudly barging their way onto the battlefield someday. What do you think about the Turkina? Is it a solid pick over one of the other clan assault mechs, or is it just not worth the cost for some jump jet fun? Is there a variant that you've had particular luck with? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. With that, I'll say thank you for sticking around for BattleTech Fun Time Story Hour. Another big thanks to the MechFrog Discord community for always having such well-painted models to share for the upcoming week's topic. If you'd like to join, I'll add the server link to these video notes below. Come hang out, it's mostly painless. Mostly. If you thought the video was worthwhile, hitting that like and subscribe button lets YouTube know that it's worth sharing with others, and you are much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. If you want to go one step further, supporting the channel through Ko-fi or becoming a YouTube channel member keeps the nonsense flowing. To all those who already have, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means so much to me that you've placed your trust in me to keep improving as a content creator. With that, I'll say have a great week. Please go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.